These are ordinary women with extraordinary lives. They are the first in their field. Molly Clark, from the Northern Territory, governess, manager of cattle stations, tourism industry pioneer and founder of the National Pioneer Women's Hall of Fame.
I was born in Mount Barker in South Australia and lived at Littlehampton until I was 6.5 years of age, when my dad passed his overseer's certificate and secured a position with the Council of Elliston, a small town on the west coast of South Australia. Here I lived until I was 18 years of age, then went nursing at Wakefield Street Private Hospital in Adelaide. However, I was not meant to be a nurse, as 26 of us went down with fluid on the lung, as TB was commonly called. We were not allowed to nurse again for 2 years, so yours truly headed for home, which was now a sheep station on the Broken Hill line. From here, after 9 months, I went as a governess to Mungarani Station. Finally, I met the man whose wife I became when we married in 1946, and the rest is history.
Ordinary women with extraordinary lives.
This is my grandmother Molly's life in her own words. She was naturally reticent about her achievements, so we have pieced together some of the history which she left out. This is her story. In 1955, Molly, her husband Mac and their 3 small sons travelled over 300 kilometres southeast of Alice Springs on dirt tracks to their new home and dado station on the edge of the Simpson Desert, a station which extended over 3,400 square kilometres. This is the same size as Christmas Island or the whole of County Clare in Ireland. Up to this point in their marriage, Molly and Mac had worked on grazing properties between Broken Hill, Birdsville and Tennant Creek, but it had always been Molly's dream for them to own their own property. They started off living in the original 1920s homestead for a few years whilst they built their new home a few kilometres west. The old homestead was left to fall down, but in 1969 Molly decided to resurrect it and turn it into a homestay for tourists. Her idea was to bring in an alternate income to help her family through the drought years. The project took almost 20 years to complete. Mostly on her own, she restored the building and the surrounding areas. The 1970s were hard years for Molly. She witnessed a catalogue of personal crises. In 1975, her middle son had a life-threatening accident. Then 3 years later, Mac had a fatal heart attack after crash landing his light aircraft. The following year, Molly's eldest son Graham was killed by a freight train while he was driving his prime mover across the railway line at night. By the end of the 70s, Molly had also lost her livelihood. The NT government was forced to destroy all of her cattle following a brucellosis scare. Just 2 years short of owning Dado Station outright, she had to sell up, keeping just 45 square kilometres of land and the restored old homestead. Over the next few years, Molly fought for compensation for lost income as well as working on a tourist venture, one of the first of its kind, at Old Dado, which was now her home. Molly welcomed paying guests who were looking for a real outback experience at her corrugated iron and timber home, set amongst alternate landscapes of flat gibber and giant sand dunes. Guests stayed in the adjoining bunkhouse or camped nearby, but were always welcome for a cuppa and a yarn in her kitchen, with its traditional range and Coolgardie safe. The homestead had no air conditioning and summer temperatures can rise well into the 40s. Going shopping for Molly was taking her battered red Toyota Land Cruiser to Alice Springs along what has become known as Molly's Track, a route that Molly personally pioneered through scrub and bulldust from the Simpson Desert back into Alice Springs. Old Dado Homestead was listed on the Heritage Register in 1993, and Molly's achievements in tourism were recognised when she was awarded a special Brolga Tourism Award in 1995. In the following years, Molly travelled throughout Australia promoting the Hall of Fame. She was attending fundraisers, talking to the media, government agencies and anyone willing to listen. She was collecting stories of women pioneers to add to the collection and doing all she could to secure a permanent home for the National Pioneer Women's Hall of Fame. On International Women's Day, 8th of March 2007, her dream was realised. Molly helped unveil the plaque for the opening of the National Pioneer Women's Hall of Fame, at its new permanent home, the Alice Springs Jail.
Ordinary women with extraordinary lives.
I always called Molly Nana, and I felt like we had a good relationship, but she was a tough nut, let me tell you. She was gruff, opinionated, and quite hard at times, but at the same time showed a love for us and protected us also. Nana was a small-built lady, but she had a determination and strength much bigger than her physical size. As she aged, she had wrinkly skin, damaged by years of exposure to sun, wind and sand, and I always remember her having bottles of moisturiser galore. The desert weather whips the skin of all its moisture. She had curly grey hair in her later years, wore glasses, and her clothing at Old Endata was always sensible. Socks and closed-in shoes, trousers or shorts, and blouses or tops. In town, in Alice Springs, she wore more feminine clothes most of the time. As a child and teenager, I didn't think too much about going to Old Endata. It was just where my Nana lived. It wasn't until my 20s that I really started to become interested in Nana's life and the history of it all. I am now a part owner of Old Endata, along with my sister and 3 cousins, and are very busy improving and restoring it, carrying on where she left off.
Molly Clark from the Northern Territory, governess, manager of cattle stations, tourism industry pioneer and founder of the National Pioneer Women's Hall of Fame. Ordinary women with extraordinary lives. They are the first in their field. Brought to you by the National Pioneer Women's Hall of Fame and 8CCC Community Radio in Alice Springs, proudly supported by the Northern Territory Government and the Community Broadcasting Foundation.